Since gun reform, how about we talk about somebody who gets it maybe a little bit more than others? Matt Larosiere, he is a constitutional attorney at the Cato Institute, contributor to Young Voices. Matt, you hear that, right? Because I hear him talk, and he was asked a question, old Cory Booker there, Spartacus himself, about maybe, buybacks or else kind of thing, which feels like gun confiscation. This entire left side of the aisle that's running for president is it's got its eye on that Second Amendment. And after yesterday, another shooting in Colorado, it is one of those things where this isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, well, the lying is really interesting. You can always tell who's on the right side of an issue, when they don't have to lie to back it up. Almost all of the statistics they mention are let's just say creatively interpreted. Like there's no connection between suicide rates and gun ownership or gun laws in any state that's been proven wrong time and time again. And what suicides have to do with mass shootings is, I mean, maybe Cory could explain it, but I certainly struggle with that.
I always say if you're going to commit suicide, you're going to commit suicide. I mean, if we find out that you got rid of guns and then 100 people, 1,000 more people jump off of bridges, are we going to get rid of bridges?
Right. Well, so that is the one thing that I tend to grant in this is that guns do make suicide more lethal. It is easier to, guns are kind of an instant switch off solution for people who are trying to commit suicide. It's, the next thing people tend to go to is pills, which doesn't, most of the time, well, guess what? Your body is programmed to kind of throw up when you put poison in it. So it's not as easy, but the argument is never made that, we're going to save suicide victims by locking people in cages who want to protect themselves. No, it's always tied to mass shootings and that type of incredibly rare violence, which we are lucky it is so rare. Statistically, you're least likely to be shot in a school. But, people are always talking about the school shootings. It's actually the safest place to be still. And the mass shooting deaths are, generally sub 100 per year, which is pretty like per 100,000. It's pretty statistically insignificant. I mean, it's comparable to Floridians being hit by coconuts. It's not it's not an epidemic.
No, well, you sure? Because I hear it's an epidemic, and that's a big word right now. Talking to Matt Larosiere, constitutional attorney over there at the Cato Institute, you hear that word epidemic. It's an epidemic, and then yesterday, of course, something happens, and we don't really get the same kind of issue as far as the 24/7 coverage of this. It happens for a few hours and we find out, well, it wasn't the gun that we don't like. And we all know that gun is semi-automatic, AR-15, all of these things that they come out. It's assault rifle. Got to use the word assault rifle. And my fear has always been this, Matt. I understand that common sense reform or common sense use of enforcing the laws that we have sound great, except for the fact that we know that government doesn't know once you give an inch that you can't take that yard because they said, why not take a little bit more? Well,
and we already have gun control laws that are far beyond what anyone would consider common sense. Anything that you could really think of, I don't know, murder hasn't been allowed for a long time, so that's off the table. People who have been adjudicated mentally incompetent, they can't have guns. And then we have things all the way to, if your evil AK-47 has one too many screws that weren't made in the United States, you could wind up in prison. So, I think we're pretty far beyond, sensible incremental gun policy. And we're getting into the point where people just want, it's valuable political capital. The rhetoric works. People are sensitive to it. And, the way the media portrays these types of weapons, it's 30 rounds, what are you going after, an army? Well, the reality is a lot more nuanced than that, but people aren't interested in learning more about it. They're just interested in responding to the fear, to the hysteria.
Yeah, a little virtue signaling. They've already tried it once, right? Is that correct? They tried a national registry once, and that kind of just went wah, wah, wah.
So a national registry has never really happened in the United States. It was known from the beginning that this would only be used to either, later on come after people. And also a main problem, even in the 1930s when they first tried this, was that, it would cause police to respond excessively violently during any interaction with somebody that they knew had a gun. And we've seen this type of thing happen in those few states that have universal gun registration. But we've known it was a bad idea. We knew it was a bad idea in the 1930s. Back then, by the way, the vast and sweeping majority of Americans supported banning all handguns. All right. So even when the vast and sweeping majority of Americans supported banning all handguns, they didn't want a national registry. And then once we had the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, the NICS system that apparently doesn't exist. If you listen to the media right now, they say, there's no background checks. Well, whatever. But when we did get the background check system put in place, it was only put in place if they would agree to destroy all of the records at the end of every single working day, just to prevent the creation of a registry. Because again, at that time it was known that registries could do no good.
Crazy. Talking to Matt Larosiere. He's over there at the Cato Industry, constitutional lawyer. Yeah, I look at all this and I listen to the Swalwells and the Cory Bookers and everybody else that comes out and says it. And I know it's virtue signaling because there's a lot of Democrats out there that are a big supporter of the Second Amendment. And so they have to walk this fine line of what do they do. The reality is, though, what do you think? What's your temperature over there at the Cato Institute? If let's just say, for the sake of argument, Bernie or Cory Booker or whoever, Kamala Harris, who's come out and said, look, I owned a gun. If they got in, what are the chances of them ever really going after these kind of things? And then, because we all know what happens, Matt, you being an attorney, you understand that more than anything else. Everything nowadays goes to one place, and that is the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court's kind of tilted to the right now. What are the chances of anything like this ever coming in where they're going to put in a national registry or anything like that?
Well, I mean, let me make one thing extremely clear. The majority of comprehensive and the strictest gun control laws that we have on the books right now were brought by Republicans and supported by Republicans. So it's not really as partisan of an issue as you think. In fact, on net, Barack Obama's presidency was more liberalizing for gun owners than Donald Trump's has been. Barack Obama made it easier to carry, I don't know if it was by accident or not, but he made it easier for regular citizens to own machine guns and suppressors and short-barreled rifles. And Donald Trump, did the whole bump stock thing, right? So
when you say that Barack made it easier, how did he make it easier?
So it was previously you had to, before his administration, you had to get the permission of your local sheriff's department to purchase one of these, these cool guy guns, these special weapons. And then under his ATF, the direction of the ATF that he put in, they reframed the requirements so that you no longer required permission. You only had to give notice. So it made it much easier for individuals living in areas with highly politicized sheriffs. If your sheriff was a Democrat, there's no way he's going to sign off on your machine gun transfer. He's just not going to do it. So that was a big deal. And it's not many people talk about that. So I mean, I don't think when I look at who's in office, as a gun rights, that's the majority of my job is doing gun rights. I've noticed almost no difference. The states, the most of the restrictive laws come from the states, and they get fought through the courts. And generally, the Supreme Court doesn't want to rule in on those specific. Like they don't want to rule in on an assault weapons ban. They don't want to rule in on this stuff. Although, I mean, I think it's pretty clearly unconstitutional. The assault weapon ban. I think it's pretty clearly unconstitutional to have a national registry. The only hope we have for having these things struck down is if John Roberts on the Supreme Court, finally decides to, step up to the table and say, look, this is a core constitutional right, and we're not going to sit here and just sign off on the every single law you write anymore. There's going to have to be you're going to have some better support for your law aside from, it's scary or, gun violence is a problem.
Talking to Matt Larosiere over there at the Cato Institute. He's a constitutional lawyer, writes about the Second Amendment. And last question, I appreciate you coming on today. Going forward, 2020 is coming. This is going to be one of those things that's going to be talked about amongst many of the other things that are out there is the Second Amendment. The battle's been there. We saw what happened in New Zealand, and everybody praised, the Prime Minister over there, Arden. Well, look what you did. Within a few days, they got rid of all of these kind of things. And don't we wish we could be like that? Where do you see this fight going in the future as far as when we get to the point, let's just say we have a Democrat who has been very vocal, because a lot of times they talk a lot of game, but we know they're not going to do anything. But this newer progressive, they really want to do something. They really want to take aim, if you will, for lack of a better term, at a lot of these laws. Where do you see this going on a bigger scale for essentially taking on the Second Amendment?
Right. Okay. So the way it's going to go, it's all going to depend on how we as a people view and talk about these things. Right. So the assault weapon thing, that's going to be the big battleground moving forward. That's going to be the big battleground, and it's extremely important. The way, and if we want to protect our rights to have these weapons that are very important weapons, for personal defense, we need to talk about it straight on. We don't want to keep just arguing about their definitions and say, whatever. I recently wrote an article called Defense of Assault Weapons, which, to my pleasure, was published by a California publication. It's, we got to say, look, we do need these weapons specifically. And here's the reason why. And one great reason why is people always say, why do you need a 30-round magazine? Well, you look at the science. There's science to all this stuff. The average police officer has a 39% chance to hit each individual target in a stressful situation. And then each round, when you look at gunshot wound data from various hospitals, each round has about a 22% chance to stop the target. You do the math there, that's about 10 or 12 shots you need to be able to reliably protect yourself from one individual, okay? So when you know that, is a 30-round magazine from a reliable weapon like an AR-15, like an AK-74, really unreasonable? No, it's not. It's a matter of human rights. It's a matter of human dignity, right? It's not about protecting, having fun at the range or whatever. This is about protecting human life. And as long as we can talk about it like that and be emotionally intelligent, I think we can make some real progress.
You said emotionally intelligent. You're a funny guy, Matt. You're a funny guy. His name's Matthew Larosiere. He is a constitutional attorney over at the Cato Institute, contributor to Young Voices. Appreciate you coming on today, man. Thanks so very much. I really do appreciate the fact that you talk about stuff like this, and you use words like emotional intelligence and to talk about stuff. That makes me laugh. Thanks so much, brother.
Right on.